All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome on into the Auburn Daily Show, episode 26 of the Auburn Daily Show. Lance Dawe here with you on this beautiful afternoon in Auburn, Alabama. Everybody out and about, a little bit of traffic, nothing that we can't handle. Hope everybody out there is doing well. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the NFL draft, how Auburn fans should feel about how the draft went. No surprise here. A little bit of drama, a little bit of frustration within the Auburn fan base, per usual. But this time it's centering around what happened with the draft. We're going to talk about how fans should feel and whether or not they should be melting down. We're also going to talk about the newest commitment to the Auburn basketball program, Johnny Broome. I have been told that his name is actually pronounced John-I Broome, or Jonai, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to try and refrain from calling him Johnny. Going to do my best. And then also we're going to get to our stat of the day, as we always do. If you're not following us already, go ahead and follow us on the socials at SI_Auburn on Twitter. You can also follow us on Facebook. Just search up Auburn Daily, live streaming every single weekday, starting at 4 p.m. Central Time on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. If you're watching post-live stream on YouTube, would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. Going to try and build things up this offseason. Got a lot of really good offseason content coming your y'all's way. And then the season is going to be really, really exciting. So make sure that you subscribed and you don't miss out on what we've got going on here at Auburn Daily. The first thing I wanted to talk about today, how should Auburn fans feel about the 2022 NFL draft and how the Tigers performed? A lot of frustration, a lot of disappointment. In case you did not see, Auburn only had one player drafted in the 2022 NFL draft, and that was cornerback Roger McCreary. Went in the second round, 35th overall pick to the Tennessee Titans. If you want to read more about that, you can go check us out over at auburndaily.com. Read an article that Zach Blackaby put out about Roger McCreary being picked. And there was a lot of disappointment, not just from fans, but from some unnamed or from unnamed media sources on Twitter about how this whole thing unfolded. So Auburn only had one draftee, but they had several guys sign an undrafted free agent contract. Smoke Monday signed one with the Saints. Zakoby McClain is heading to the Ravens. Chandler Wooten to the Cardinals. T.D. Moultrie to the Steelers. Demetrius Robertson's heading to the Seahawks. And then Brodarius Ham is also heading to the Ravens alongside Zakoby McClain. So Auburn had 6 different guys sign undrafted free agent deals and only one drafted. Again, a lot of people saying, I cannot believe Auburn only got one player drafted. I'm just in shock. I'm disappointed in Brian Harsin. I'm disappointed in where the program's at, and in terms of just development and getting guys to leave. Like, this is not good. This is just not good. A couple of things here that I want to say. First of all, I think that it's okay to be frustrated and acknowledge the fact that only having one player drafted stinks. That stinks. There's no other way to slice it. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's perfectly okay that Auburn didn't have more than one player drafted. It stinks. But what I will tell you is that it does not warrant melting down. At least that is my opinion. We'll get to that in a second. Stuart Donald in the chat. Hope you're doing well, Stuart. In 2003, Auburn didn't have a single player. In 2004, they went undefeated and have 4 players taken in the first round, including 3 of the top 10 picks. If anything, this reinforces the need to change head coach. And I think that we are a year away from determining whether or not Brian Harsin should be let go. I think we're a year away from that. And I'm going to explain why in just a second. But something I want to point out here is that while Auburn only had one player drafted, there are several players, in my opinion, that are waiting in the wings and have decided that they will return this season. Instead of declaring for the NFL draft, Auburn had a few guys decide that they were coming back. Derek Hall being one of them. Owen Papo, had he been healthy, I think could have declared. Just reinforces that a change at head coach was needed. Are you saying, Stuart, are you saying like at the time, or are you saying like right now we need to make a change based on the results of the draft? I'm confused. I may just be dumb. That's probably what it is. But Derek Hall, I think, is one. Owen Papo is another. Colby Wooden is another. Tank, Jalen Simpson. I think somebody on the offensive line this time next season could potentially have a shot at getting drafted. And then this is just a random one here, but if not Harsin, Gus, I got you. This year's draft is not a reflection on our head coach's ability to develop players. I'm going to get to that in a second, Zach. I appreciate you mentioning that. But we've got several guys that are returning that could be NFL draft picks next year. And this is just a random one to throw at you. John Samuel Schenker. I mean, if he has a good season, if he has a good year, could he end up being a late draftee? I think that it's perfectly within the realm of possibility. But in my opinion, this is not Bryan Harsin's fault. When you look at the guys that were going to either get drafted or potentially sign undrafted free agent deals, all of them are Gus Malzahn's players outside of Demetrius Robertson, who was a transfer portal kid. Every single other player was a Gus Malzahn recruit. And Zach Blackerby, host of the Locks on Auburn podcast, writer here at auburndaily.com, had similar opinions about these players as I do, and Bryan Harsin as well, which is Bryan Harsin couldn't just make Zakoby McClain 2 inches taller. He couldn't just make Roger McCreary's arms longer. He couldn't just make Smoke Monday better than what Smoke Monday is. We don't have to dive into that now. That's all I'm going to say there. But I think in terms of development of kids that weren't originally his, I think Bryan Harsin did a decent job with what he was given. Now, this next year, I think, is going to be more telling because you've had yet another year with some of these guys that have opted to return. You've got some more of your own recruits into the system. It's going to be interesting to see how Harsin develops those guys, but I think there's reason to believe that he will. I think there's reason to err on the side of optimism or be neutral about the situation instead of being incredibly negative and being incredibly critical of the state of the program. We've talked about this recently on the show, I believe. Boise State, during Chris Peterson's time there and during Bryan Harsin's time there, Boise State, I think there's not really a lot of arguing with this, and I'm sure we could go pull up some numbers to back this up, and I've probably talked about the numbers before here on the show just in terms of like the output of NFL talent into from that program, but like Boise State's like the best group of 5 school in the country in terms of just getting guys into the NFL consistently. And I know that Cincinnati, they had their run this year, right? Certainly had their run this year. Let's acknowledge that. I think if you look during Bryan Harsin's time there and during Chris Peterson's time, just over the past decade, Boise State has been the best group of 5 school in terms of recruiting guys that were 3-star kids and making them NFL players and winning games and being impressive and just being a solid overall program. When you look at our Auburn situation with Bryan Harsin, I think there's reason to believe that with the additional amount of talent that Harsin has the ability to develop and recruit, he is going to be able to do what he did with the Broncos, which is put guys in the NFL. I don't really know why there would be pushback on that to say, well, actually, he's not going to be able to, and here's why. It's like, well, I mean, he's done it. He's done it elsewhere with less talent. Why would he not be able to at least have some sort of resemblance to what he did at Boise, right? And so I just think that we need to reserve our opinions about Bryan Harsin, his ability to develop, his ability to get these guys in here and put them in the league. We need to wait. We need to be a little bit more patient. It's been one season. It's been one season with guys that he did not recruit. Let's see how he performs with guys that he actually brought on campus. Hot man in the chat, what's going on, dude? Glad you're here with us. And then Zach noted earlier, this year's draft is not a reflection on our head coach's ability to develop players. And that's what I'm saying here is that Harsin, I think, is a good developer of talent. And I think that last year at Auburn, you saw in certain areas the team improve. Now, there were things that you can go back and criticize. The decision-making, the run blocking was a question mark. I will say this, overall, the hiring of Will Friend was somewhat of a gamble, in my opinion, because of what he did at Tennessee. He was really, really good at recruiting offensive linemen at Tennessee, but he was not particularly great at getting them to play well. I'm curious if we see the same track record here with the Tigers, but point being, like, there were certain things you could criticize, but overall, I think the wide receiver room took a step in the right direction. Ike Hilliard now, the coach of that group, how do they develop? I think they're going to take a step forward this year, and I'm really excited to see what Hilliard does as a coach here with the Tigers. But I think those guys are going to take a step forward. I think the defensive line is going to be really good this season. I think the secondary is going to be able to kind of gel a little bit better than they were last season. Just a lack of cohesion, a lack of communication, I think, at times with a new scheme in 2021. There's reason to believe that Harsin will be able to correct the mistakes that he had this prior season en route to, I guess, overachieving. I think that there's more potential for Auburn to overachieve and shock people than it is for Brian Harsin to go 4-8, 5-7 and get fired. I think it's more likely. And Brian Harsin said it himself in a recent interview with ESPN. He said, I think our team's underrated. I think everybody saw what happened during the spring with all that crap with the athletic department and just kind of wrote us off and said, oh, this team's irrelevant. Oh, they don't have the talent. Oh, they don't have the guys to go out there and compete. It's like, no, actually, we've still got talent on roster. I'm still a good developer of talent, and we're going to go out there and try and win some games, and darn it if we don't win more than people think we will. And I'm going to support him until there is enough evidence to support not supporting him, and I don't think there's enough there yet. And I think a lot of people had a similar mindset, even all the way back in or early, like February, whenever all these things were going on with Brian Harsin and the athletic department. And I mean, we've heard different players come out and say in interviews. I mean, to go back to Zach Blackerby, he's had guys on his podcast recently that have come on and he said this on today's episode. I would highly encourage you to go check out his opinion on the situation. He was like, look, I've had guys on unprompted talk about how strong the connection between the team and the coaching staff and everybody in between is. Like they're a close group, right? And I think the fact that there are still guys willing to come back to the program, guys willing to come into the program, a potential 5-star flip in Jalil Hurley. The fact that all these things are going on, I think it sends a positive message out there to the fan base that I don't necessarily think fans are reading. Some, at least, not everybody. But even if you don't believe that Brian Harsin is the answer, if you don't think Brian Harsin is going to be able to pull this off, if you don't think that Auburn's going to be able to get back to where they were and then some in the future under Harsin and his coaching staff, that's fine. That's completely fine. I'm saying for me, though, and I would suggest that the rest of the fan base do this for their own mental health, let's not give too much emotional currency to something that doesn't require you to give it, right? Don't give away your emotional currency. Don't spend your time worrying about things that don't significantly impact you. It's okay to love a team. It's okay to support a team. Absolutely. I'm not saying to fans, don't be fans. I'm not saying don't support the team. I'm just saying if we're going to do anything, even if we don't believe in what's going on, I think it's better to, instead of act like the world is ending, at least be somewhat neutral or lean optimistic. It's like, well, I'm going to pull for my team. Well, here are some of the reasons why this could go right. Here are some of the reasons why this might be okay. Or how about we just reserve opinions until after this season? I think that there's no rush to jump the gun here. There's no reason to. We're a year and a half into this process. How about we focus on the most important thing, I think, right now, outside of developing a quarterback, which is just focusing on getting better. Just focusing on getting better this offseason. And then also find a quarterback. That's important too. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Auburn fans and how they should feel about the 2022 NFL draft. It's like, it's not as bad as some people want to make it out to be. It's not a reflection on Brian Harsin and his ability to recruit and develop talent, like Zach said earlier. That's not what this is. It stinks. I think next year is going to be better, though. And I would love to lean on the side of optimism than not. All right. I want to talk about Johnny Broomer. Jonai Broom, how you properly pronounce his name, I believe. Going to talk about his commitment to the Auburn Tigers in just a second. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at aushirts.com. They've got some phenomenal merch out. Most recently, they've got some Auburn Daily merch out. I've ordered mine. It's in the mail. It's coming. I'm really excited about it. Can't wait to show you guys. They've also got several designs made for players, specifically a lot of baseball players right now. Blake Burkhalter, Sonny DeShera, they've got designs. Brody Moore, I believe, has the design as well. And Blake Burkhalter's is absolutely dope. Closing time with a backwards K. That's sweet. They've got all these different things to help you flex your Auburn fandom over at aushirts.com. And right now, AU Shirts is giving Auburn Daily viewers 10% off their order. All you have to do is use promo code DAILY at checkout. Again, that's aushirts.com using promo code DAILY for 10% off your order when you check out. Would highly encourage you guys to go check them out. Stuart Donald also notes, college football is a kid sport played by kids and taken too seriously by adults, but I sure love it. And that's kind of the struggle here. Is like, I'm there with you. It's like, I love college football. I love Auburn football. I love Auburn as a program. I love just college football as a whole. And I'm going to emotionally invest myself into it. But there are times where you get a little too invested into it when you should not be. And I think that it's fair to take a step back and just kind of assess, okay, am I giving this too much? But if you love it, give it the time of day. If you truly do love it, I think it's worth spending your time on and taking a dive into. I think it's a great point there. It's a kid sport played by kids, taken a little too seriously by adults. And some media members that we will not directly name. If you have been scrolling through Twitter as of the past, 36 hours. I don't know. People be dramatic sometimes. That's just how it is. All right. Jonai Broom commits to Auburn. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. And my first thought after looking at some of this kid's film is that he is Horace Spencer on steroids. Now, some of you may disagree with that. That's okay. No disrespect to Horace. Thought he was great. Jonai Broom, 6'10" forward out of Morehead State, committed to the Auburn Tigers over Florida. You can go read an article over at auburndaily.com written by Zach Blackerby discussing the Morehead State transfer. Averaged 10.5 rebounds per game, almost 17 points per game, a little under 4 blocks per game. Really, really good back to the basket type of player. And he's got something in his arsenal that reminds me of Horace Spencer, but a little bit better in my opinion. It's that back to the basket and then hook shot, right? That's something that Horace would like to do. He'd like to throw the hook over the shoulder, get into the paint and throw that up there. But Jonai Broom is really, really good at doing that as well. And Zach Blackerby notes that the 6'10" post player really brings a physical edge to Bruce Pearl's front court that will instantly be in his starting lineup in the quest to defend the SEC regular season championship from last season. Broom will have 3 years of eligibility and could offer some stability to the Tigers when it comes to having size and presence down low. Broom in Morehead State played in Auburn Arena in the season opener. He was able to score 12 points on 15 shots, was actually one of the least efficient games of his season, but it was against the Defensive Player of the Year, Walker Kessler. Is this a replacement for the DPOI Walker Kessler? The answer in my mind is no. I think that Johan Traore is going to likely play the 5. I would be surprised if he didn't, but I may end up being off on that come November. Who knows? Broom may start at the 4. Johan Traore may start at the 5. Traore may start at the 4. Broom may start at the 5. Where does Jalen Williams factor into all of this? To be quite honest with you, because of my lack of confidence in Alan Flanagan and the depth that you have at small forward, I mean, Williams, I think it would be out of position, but he could run some minutes at the 3. I'm that desperate to get some production out of the 3. But yeah, Johnny Broom, I think, is a great addition. He's going to bring that shot blocking presence to the paint. A lot of Auburn fans really excited about this pickup. Was really efficient, especially in late in the season for Morehead State. I mean, whenever you get a guy that was averaging over a double-double per contest, I mean, it's pretty sweet. It's pretty sweet. And I think the one thing that you have to ask now after this commitment is Auburn's lineup complete? And there are some folks out there that have said, well, maybe they should get a shooter. Maybe they should go out there and get somebody that can handle the ball and is a little bit bigger than what we have on roster currently that could play the 2 or the 3. And I think that certainly Auburn has to go out there and pursue that. But, they could probably get away with heading into this season without making one more addition. Where does Julian Phillips stand right now? I think is a good question. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But you could do a little bit more work. You could get another transfer if you want to. I'm just curious to see whether or not Auburn does that. So that's my take on John Broom committing to the Tigers. Really excited to pick him up. Probably going to talk about him and the starting lineup and the rotation just as a whole more in depth on this show. I've got one more thing I want to talk about here with you guys today. The stat of the day. And this revolves around Auburn's history with the Mercer Bears. The statistic of the day here, Auburn is 12-0 against their season opening opponent, Mercer. Hang on one real quick. Zach says Broom at the 5 and Traore at the 4. I think that's possible. It's just, I don't know. I like Traore's game overall, but I think you can make the argument that Traore is much better at driving towards the basket. He's better at facing the basket than posted up. And I think, yeah, you could make the argument that Broom should be at the 5. I mean, they're both the same height. It's just Traore, I think, has got a little bit more meat on him, but I may be wrong on that too. Anyway, stat of the day. Auburn's 12-0 against Mercer, Auburn's season opening opponent this season. Auburn's series with the Mercer Bears is one of the 34 series in which Auburn has a perfect record against non-FBS teams. Interesting note there. So what exactly does this mean? This is an article written over at auburndaily.com by our boy Zach Blackerby. What it means is Auburn will start a new quarterback at the start of the season and will need some live reps against another team to help prepare for some of the tougher defenses down the road. We've talked about the schedule before here on the show, talked about how it builds up, talked about what the quarterbacks are going to be doing in weeks 1 and 2, just kind of preparing for that Penn State game. Hopefully they're not dogfights. I would like to hope that they aren't, but if they are, ooh. But whether it's Zach Calzada, TJ Finley, Robbie Ashford, or Holden Garner, whoever it may be, leading the 2022 offense, they will need reps to develop as the leader that this offense needs. And boy, howdy do they need it. This is something else that Zach notes. Auburn games with Mercer have not always been a layup. In 2017, Auburn was expected to blow out the Bears. It was a little dicey in the second half. Tigers eventually won the game 24-10, the closest outcome in the history of the 12-game series. I believe Auburn turned the ball over like 4 or 5 times that game. And if I'm not mistaken, Cam Petway scored every touchdown that Auburn had that day. I don't have it pulled up. I'm based on my memory. Second closest outcome came over 100 years ago when Auburn won 23-5 in 1909. Just tells you how much of an exception that game in 2017 was. It was a team that won the SEC title, the SEC West, lost in the SEC championship game. The most lopsided win in the history of the series was 92-0 in favor of the Tigers during the 1916 season. So an interesting statistic there about Mercer and the Tigers and their history together. And I think we're probably going to do some deep dives onto Auburn's individual opponents throughout this offseason. Going to talk about just about every position group that they have, what they're bringing back, what they're not, what they're good at, what they're not, how Auburn should attack them, what Auburn is kind of preparing to do. Going to be a lot of analysis here during the offseason. Going to be a lot of record predicting. Maybe not just for Auburn, maybe for the SEC, because I would love to do that. But yeah, there you go. Auburn and Mercer never lost to the Mercer Bears. Hopefully that does not happen this season. Hope I did not just jinx that or speak it into existence. All right. Well, that's going to do it, guys, for today's episode of the Auburn Daily Show. Again, look, if you're not following us on the socials, follow us on Twitter at @SI_Auburn. You can also follow us on Facebook at Auburn Daily, live streaming every single day from 4 to just about whenever we feel like. Facebook, YouTube, Twitch. Make sure you check us out on all 3 of those platforms. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of the Auburn Daily Show. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and God bless.